Welcome to the 20 Years of Morrowind podcast. Morrowind is a shared journey that we took on our own, and today, well, we're gonna meet at the crossroad, and we are going to meet with RottenDeadite, a Twitch live streamer and a lore master. Welcome on in.
Hi, thanks. I love the, it's an experience that we shared on our own. That's just lovely. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I've been talking a lot with Zero Fox about this, and as we were talking, we're like, oh yes, that's what we're doing, and so I've kept the expression because I liked it too. So thank you for
that's excellent
for enjoying the tagline, is it?
Oh. Well, it's a great way of explaining. Morrowind is a really important game to a lot of people, and it's one of those. It's almost like a cult classic, sort of, when you think about it. Like cult movies, I should say, appeal to a very small audience, but they appeal in a very deep and serious way. And Morrowind's kind of like that, but it's not really a small audience. It's just small compared to like Skyrim, which is gigantic. That's a huge audience. But people who are Morrowind fans, it seems like they're Morrowind fans for the rest of their lives. I mean, it doesn't matter how old they get, doesn't matter how many years it's been since they played it, and they're still making more and more material. Every once in a while on Instagram, I'll catch somebody doing some mind-blowing Dagothr cosplay or something, and there was like some Russian kids, I think, who were doing Tribunal cosplay that was earth-shattering. It was just phenomenal, and I remember thinking, like, this is why this game, like, I told Michael Kirkbride when I met him, I said people are going to be talking about Morrowind for the next 100 years, and I really mean that. It's an amazing game.
Yes. So. The best part about the game getting old is that now those people that love the game are sharing it with their children. And even just teenagers, they go, oh, I played Skyrim, liked it, let's try this old thing. And they find out that they love it, maybe even more, which always makes me very happy.
Well, it's also very handy that modders are keeping it updated.
Yes.
Wink.
Doing magic.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about your story with Morrowind, your Morrowind journey?
That's as soon as you pay attention to that cat. Okay.
Yeah. Nobody can see it, but my cat is here. So you can see how cute he is. It's super
oh my
fuzzy.
God.
His name is Latte because I have a passion for coffee, cafe latte.
That sounds right.
But
okay, how did I get into Morrowind? I played Daggerfall when it came out. Is one of those game purchases where I bought it purely based on the cover art, and because it had that ridiculous, like, holographic cover, and I was like, this game can't fail to be awesome. And and then when Morrowind came out, I remember picking it up at the store thinking, oh, this is that sequel to Daggerfall.
Should be all right.
And yeah, it was Daggerfall 2. Neat. And so I picked it up and brought it home and played it nonstop, pretty much from the moment it started. The moment you walk out of that ship in Seyda-Neen, I knew I was dealing with something really different and amazing. And I played the bejesus out of that game until I was finished with it. I don't know how many hours I put into it, didn't have any tracking, but I know that I was hugely overpowered by the time I was finished. And then I played both expansions, and I wouldn't say I forgot about it. Like, I always remembered playing it, but I didn't really pay very much attention to it again. Even after Oblivion came out and I played that, and I was like, okay, well, I know this is the next game in the series, but I didn't really pay much attention to Morrowind for many years until it's been about 10 or possibly 11 years now ago that I picked up. I was in a really terrible situation with my wife at the time, who was having a medical issue, and she had been It was a life-threatening medical issue, and we were trying to just find things to talk about that weren't the medical issue.
Mhm.
And I had been just I had been in waiting rooms, just flipping through my phone, reading articles on the internet and reading Bethesda forums, and I found a link to an article called "The Metaphysics of Morrowind" on a blog called Falling Awkwardly, which has been sort of like the gateway drug for a lot of deep lore nerds, as I've discovered.
Mhm.
And blew my mind that the as the author suggested, that Vivek and Morrowind might be writing the 36 lessons of Vivek to explain the fact that he may or Z may understand that Z is in like an actual video game, like that and her perception of the of reality from within the context of a game that has rules and a beginning and an end and etc. and a winner. And I thought that was unbelievably clever. Like, I can't believe that they wrote this, this Kirkbride guy wrote this really amazing series of books that on first glance make no sense whatsoever. And and so I had this idea, like, I kind of used it to distract myself and from some of the more unpleasant hospital stays that we had, and and it was something that I tried to get my she's my ex-wife now into, but she just wasn't couldn't manage it. It just didn't click. And but while we were involved with all of this medical stuff that was happening, she was getting a lot of MRI work done. And a line in the love letter from the Fifth Era, which Kirkbride posted to the official forum, stuck out about the state gradient echo of Mundus Centaurex. And I was like, that's such a weird collection of words, but for some reason or other, it sounds really interesting and familiar. And it's because I had found that what had happened was I had found some technical information about MRIs, because I was trying to figure out how they worked, because you read everything you can read when you're trying not to think about what's going on in your life. And a state gradient echo, which I believe the technical term is a steady state gradient echo, is a type of reading, a type of measurement that you can do with an MRI. And so that suddenly got me interested in, like, well, how does that apply to what the love letter from the Fifth Era is about? And once I kind of thought I'd figured it out, I wrote an article about it and posted on the official Bethesda forums, and Kirkbride wrote something like, nice job or something underneath it. Nice. And I literally, like, underneath it, like, after I read that, I literally had this voice in my head that said, well, this is what you're doing for the rest of your life. And so people, but even back then, were bugging me, like, can you explain the 36 lessons of Vivek? And I said, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so I kind of got drafted into that by the community. And I started doing gobs and gobs of research, where I started reading the books that the 36 lessons were based on, like Journey to the West, and I started reading a lot about metaphysics and mysticism, Gnosticism, all these other philosophies that are, and religions that are integrated into the 36 lessons of Vivek, because Kirkbride is a real comparative religion nerd. And so I started my website, newwhirlingschool.com, and where I'm going line by line through the 36 lessons of Vivek, explaining every single thing I can find. And it has been a huge eye-opener in my life. It gave me the material that I was reading, and the philosophy that I was reading helped me through a lot of really rugged situations, definitely helped me through my divorce. And it's been really enriching in a way that when people talk about, like, do what you love, do what you love and you'll never work another day in your life. I don't buy that, but but I do believe that if you feel like you have a purpose or a use in your life that is bigger than just paying bills, it can make the hardest stuff a little bit more manageable. And many people go their whole lives without getting that feeling. And so I'm just overwhelmingly grateful at times for having that, this gift in my life of this video game, and of the people involved in it, and of the stories they told, and of all the real world material that was pulled in to create it. Has just been fantastic. I can't get enough of it.
Well, if I understand, you've been in it for 10 years, give or take.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And I'm sure you got, the rest of your life, and I'm not sure that's going to be enough to uncover everything there is to uncover.
Well, I'm not sure either. one of the things that I realized very quickly when I was in like the second or third sermon was because the 36 lessons pull in so many exterior influences, and those exterior influences, in order to fully understand them, have further influences. It's almost impossible to. It is a bottomless pit. You get into it you get out of it what you put into it, and the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. And that's why I like to call what we do deep lore, is because it's incredibly deep. You just can't like fathom it, and that's the one attribute to the 36 lessons that I realized was that I'm never really going to be done. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be. It's one of the reasons why it's a website and not a book, is because it's always going to be evolving. It's always going to be changing. I'm going to find new things. I'm going to find stuff in later lessons that reveal something cool in earlier lessons. Like one of the first things that I found that I was really proud of was that in the I think sermon 1. The Netchman's wife, Vivek's air quotes mother, was instructed to repeat a spell, I am a Seti a Vec, which is a 7-syllable spell. And of course, there's plenty of symbolism behind the number 7, and etc. And then I realized later on, the 4 corners of the House of Troubles, the 4 bad Daedra, are called Molag Bal, Dagon, Shiog, which is another 7-syllable spell. So because they're the enemy of the tribunal, it only makes sense that they would have the same powerful name, in mystically speaking. And when I started finding stuff like that, it was just like, yeah, I'm never going to be done.
So really, when you say deep lore, it should be called bottomless lore.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Well, I mean, eventually it just gets to the point where it stops being fiction. You stop studying fiction and you start studying real life, which is probably incredibly heavy. It's probably a very deep idea, but I don't really have the time to explore that in my head right now.
Well, as long as everybody has eaten and drunk something and does not need to sleep for the next few days, we can.
I'll bring Aramithius on. He's a philosophy major. He'll be better at talking about it than I am. So.
But you say that jokingly, but if you wanted to do a master in philosophy, with everything you've read and all the different references and the things that you've cross-referenced, I got a feeling you probably could.
Well, I sometimes think about that, and then I realize how expensive student loans are, and I don't want to do it.
And why pay for student loans when you can just read up?
I could just go to a casino and lose money that way.
Also, yeah, I didn't think of that. From what you're saying, it sounds like you basically discovered a layer to what is at the beginning just a game.
Mm-hmm.
Have you played the game again? Like, after having, been into the lore and everything, have you played the game again, and did it feel different?
It did, especially when you start working in like some of the deep lore concepts, like the enantiomorphic event and the metaphysics behind the thief, the warrior, and the mage archetypes, and so on. You start to pick out patterns of that story frame in all parts of Morrowind. Talking to Telvanni mages and seeing their personality come across in dialogue, and dealing with how sort of detached they are from Morrowind's politics and economy, and it makes sense that they're the mage archetype. And then the same thing for Hlalu, where you discover that the thief house is basically doing whatever they can to make profit at any possible corner, and then Redoran are trying to hold on to the past, like the king would, in the Rebel Thief and King, the Rebel King and the Witness.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to notice the nuance for the the structure of the game, and that goes beyond just the basic, that goes beyond the metaphysics of the whole thing. One of the things that made Skyrim a lot of fun for me was picking apart how the existential threat that the Thalmor are to the Arbus in general, and how their purpose is basically to deconstruct all of Mundus and all of reality, and how they're going about doing it.
I know that now, but I didn't get that from the game.
Oh yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is that you don't pick that up while you're playing the game, but if you know that going in, it adds such an extra layer to the game that it starts to make a lot more sense that there's two major threats to existence, and Alduin's just one of them. He's the immediate one, but he's not the only one. And it makes the Thalmor seem even more insidious than they already are in Skyrim, and they are. It's the games are. I always kind of felt like deep lore for the Elder Scrolls games was best experienced through the books and not necessarily gameplay. I like to see little bits of really, obscenely deep lore in video games. A lot of the stuff that shows up in the Elder Scrolls Online, vis-a-vis like the Morrowind and definitely the Clockwork City quests, are very, very deep, and it's nice when they show up. But the problem with metaphysics is that it's really hard to introduce into a video game and not bore the player to tears, because I mean, there's going to be a lot of exposition, there's going to be a lot of dialogue, there's going to be a lot of reading involved, and do you really want a player to miss out on a plot point because they just didn't read this 30-page tome that you threw at them? Yeah, exactly. And then you have the additional layer of voice acting and the cost that presents. Yeah.
I was wondering, because we talk about Morrowind, and for you that's basically where you discovered the lore and how deep it is and how connected to real life it actually is. What about the lore in Arena and Daggerfall? Is it as deep, or it's just the beginning of things?
Arena and Daggerfall were originally just, as it's been told to me, Arena and Daggerfall were originally just Todd Howard and Company's D&D campaign that they couldn't get the rights to from TSR, so they just filed the serial numbers off and then they turned that into a video game. So a lot of the similarities between Arena and Daggerfall, the Elder Scrolls universe in Arena and Daggerfall, are intentional. They're supposed to be like it's basically it's D&D wink, or not D&D trademark, and so like a lot of the books that were in the game, in both games, were written by developers and playtesters and so on, who were these people were just writing lore for the game, so they would have books in them, not because they needed to tell a particular story or they had to explain a particular point in history or whatever. They were just like, well, we want books, and so everybody should write some books. And so, that's where they came from. It wasn't until Morrowind that Kirkbride and Kuhlman kind of rewrote the whole background story and everything to the video game, and create and sort of made it much more unique, or I don't know, and that was that's kind of where, and it's sort of fitting that that's where the majority of like deep lore started, was from Morrowind, was from there establishing the universe. Yeah.
Clearly, there's a lot. I feel like the lore is like an onion, and you just keep peeling, and possibly you keep crying as you do so.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful metaphor for lore. I'm gonna keep that one.
Yeah.
Here's my thought. Clearly, the sense, the feeling that lore is so deep, that there's so much to it, is appealing. You go like, well, that's gotta be really interesting. At least you're selling it. Like, I'm like, I gotta read those things. At the same time, it's like, oh my god, there's so much to it, and now
Yeah.
I have to study all the philosophy and the religions that date back thousands of years. It's a little intimidating as well. So what would you recommend to somebody who's like, you know what, I want to know a little bit more about the lore? Where do they start?
Lady Nerevar's got a phenomenal guide of how to become a lore buff. I would highly, highly recommend starting there. In general, the advice that I would give people, if you want to dig as deep as you can get, is just read a lot of the of lore in the games. Play the games, obviously, so that you have a visual in your head. Makes it easier. But then just read and consume as many of the books as you feel like you can. And if they start off kind of boring, then skip them. I mean, like, don't stress too much about reading absolutely everything, but just read until you find something that tickles your fancy, and then start doing research on that. And just let it happen organically, because you can't really, there's so much you can't really decide ahead of time what you want to do without possibly making a mistake. There are some people that I know who did get into Elder Scrolls Deep Lore because they were like, I want to know everything I can about blank. And that's what they did. And they set a goal and they freaking met it. And that's admirable. I have never been able to do that in my life. Everything I've done in Elder Scrolls lore has just been, well, I feel like I can tackle this, and a week later I'm like, I want to do this. And then you find something else, Tribunal and Dunmer lore has been like my jam, because it's one of the few things that I was in Elder Scrolls lore that I was able to read about and stay interested in, and then retain that information afterwards. But there are lore nerds like Lady Nerevar, again, for example, who are able to recall incredibly minute details about history in the Elder Scrolls universe, and talk about like what kings followed what, and what event led to another event. That is just dizzying to me. I've never been able to do that. Not for real life history, not for fictional history, never. It's never been able to work. So that's what I mean. I would not worry too much about trying to become a lore expert or anything. The lore is so freaking extensive and deep that we need specialists, and everybody can find, if everybody wants to find something that they want to explore until they feel like they've hit the bottom, then that's valuable to the community as a whole. We need lots of that, there's back in the early days of my podcast, we would want to talk about something, and we would just go out and find somebody in the community who we considered an expert and bring them in and be like, we have no idea what's going on here. You come and talk to us about it.
Well, that's a good way to go about it. You mentioned your podcast. Tell us a little bit about it. I'll put the links in the description, but before I forget to ask you to mention it.
Well, we're on, most people I think know us from youtube.com/memospore. We stream live on my Twitch channel, which is in the near future going to have its name changed, but currently it's twitch.tv/RottenDeadite, but eventually it'll change to /memospore after I finish the theme. And then, and we do that live. We usually get about 30-something viewers, and which is exactly the right number of people, so that we can get a good discussion going in chat and bring it into the stream as well. It's Banu Hanamasashi, myself, the White Guar, and Aramithius most days. Every once in a while, it might be three of us. And we are we're just going through everything we can. We're talking about literally everything we can find. And it's not, no topic is off limits, and we'll spend as long as we can talking about everything until we feel like we've covered everything. And if we haven't covered everything, we'll do another episode, and we'll just keep going until we literally run out.
How do you pick the themes? Is it like we should talk about this next, or somebody in the chat says, "Hey, what about?" Yes.
Yeah, bingo. Yeah, it's just we're just like, hey, we haven't talked about this in a while, and or we'll get an email from somebody who says, you guys should really discuss this more, or you haven't talked about this at all, or something. Like, we still get people asking us to discuss Jiggalag, and we're like, there's nothing to talk about. Like, there's nothing there, but yeah, that's the podcast has been a good way of kind of growing the community, the deep lore community, a little bit. But we're always trying to pull more people in, because the more eyes you get on these things, the more detail you'll find.
Agreed. But what is it, in your opinion, that makes the Morrowind, and to a greater extent the Elder Scrolls lore, so compelling?
The devs were originally, Kirkbride and Kuhlman especially, were originally inspired by a D&D setting called Glorantha, which is noteworthy in its world building in that none of the mortal occupants of the universe, actually have the full answer of how the universe was created. And everybody has different creation myths. And that's the case in the Elder Scrolls universe as well. Nobody has the full story. Every piece of text that is written in the game is written from an in-universe perspective, which means that the author had an agenda and prejudice and sometimes outright racism. And
what, in Morrowind? No.
Yeah, in Morrowind, yeah. And there's and that makes the universe feel real. It makes it even if you're not really paying very close attention to the specifics of the universe, you'll pick up, just from reading books, you'll pick up this feeling of immersion, of realism, just from how everything is written in character. And that was probably one of the brightest things that they did, I think, next to the addition of the metaphysics systems. It was brilliant because it gave the ability for them to create very complex and meaningful and relatable stories that remind us of things in real life, that make us think about the things in our real lives. Most recently, of course, the conversation that the community is having about the Thalmor, and about whether or not the Thalmor have a point or not, and whether their actions are justified in trying to delete mankind out of reality.
What is their explanation for that? It's not because they're evil. They actually have a fairly good reason.
Yeah, it's because the Thalmor believe, and many other races believe, unfortunately this is backed up by a lot of other perspectives, that the Aedra, the 8 Aedra that came together to create Mundus and the material realm, were tricked by Lorkhan into creating this reality, and that the true existence of reality is closer to what you would experience if you were in Aetherius, in air quotes heaven, which is sort of like this majestic oneness of everything all the time, where there is no death and no time and no age, and everything is bright and brilliant. And the Thalmor, due to their connection to the Aedra and the Atata, the gods that are not that are no longer in Mundus or interact with Mundus, they claim that this, plus their research, their own independent research that they've done, and the studying reality and such, has led them to believe that Mundus is an awful place. Which, if you're paying any attention to the Elder Scrolls games, it's objectively awful. It's absolutely terrible. Like, I think Lady Nerevar's Parabolic Kalpa article suggests that the Elder Scrolls is actually a post-apocalyptic magic society, and the fact that they have a that they can draw a straight line from Lorcan this unpleasant existence means that they have an argument for getting rid of it, and the way that they've discovered is that all of reality in Mundus is supported by what's called 8 towers. Snowthroat Mountain is one of them. White Gold Tower in Cyrodiil is another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that if these towers are neutralized or converted or outright destroyed, it should bring all of reality crashing down, and Mundus will sort of like implode, and then everybody will, air quotes, die. But instead of being reincarnated back into Mundus again, you'll return back up into Aetherius and live in, again, heaven. As the Altmer argue that, or as the Thalmor argue, that's what should be happening. That's what reality ought to be.
Basically, they're saying your life, your world is just a big prank. We're going to fix it for you.
Exactly, we'll fix it up, and it's got sort of like, it's kind of math to them. It's like algebra. It makes sense. It's just, it's not really that they're doing it because they're mean. They're doing it because there's a bug in the system and they want to get rid of it. And it's not it doesn't mean that all Thalmor are sympathetic characters. Certainly not. But it does mean that intrinsically at their root, the Thalmor are made more powerful as an enemy because they're kind of right. And they're right in a way that you can prove with a pocket calculator. It's not complicated. And so there was talk at one point, I don't know if that's still what they're doing, but there was talk around Bethesda that the story of the Elder Scrolls universe, unlike the story of every other Tolkien-esque universe, which is a story of the elves leaving the mortal realms and going back to whatever, or dying out, or ascending to another plane or something, and it's the rise of man. Instead, the Elder Scrolls would be about the fall of man and the return of and like the defeat of mankind by the elves, because again, it's just something to differentiate it. I don't know if they're still going to do that. I'm not making any predictions. They're going to do whatever they feel like doing. It's their game. They get to do that.
Exactly. We'll wait and see. You said that the lore really started with Morrowind. Did it continue with Oblivion?
Oh, definitely, 100%. Yeah. We actually, as a metaphysics nerd, we found out a lot more about the metaphysics of the universe from Mankar Camoran, the bad guy in Oblivion, and his commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, which are just freaking crazy, and heavily inspired by Thelema documents written by Aleister Crowley, and not that the 36 Lessons of Vivek weren't, but much more so, especially in tone, with the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. And so we were able to find out a lot more stuff. We were able to get some ideas were reinforced by some of the lore in Oblivion. I'm not a huge fan of the way Oblivion looks, but Oblivion's quest lines are unbelievably good from a deep lore perspective. The Thieves Guild is really excellent. The Mages Guild has some great stuff. There's a couple of very tough answers that are attempted to be answered in the main quest. The Dark Brotherhood is like, I once said it was like playing Grand Theft Auto in the Elder Scrolls. It's just like one insane mission after another. And they just get crazier and crazier. As much as I like Morrowind for its setting and its artistic, direction, I kind of have to give the edge to Oblivion for quest content. I did feel like Oblivion really knocked it out of the park for just quests and engagement for me, and then Skyrim was just gorgeous. So, just very pretty.
It is pretty. It is pretty. Tell us a little bit about Skyrim. What were your impressions when you played it? At that time, you were already in the lore, so I'm guessing maybe you were a little distracted, just making connections between what's happening in the game and what you know of the lore, rather than just play the game.
Skyrim came out at roughly the same time I started getting into the lore, so I was learning as I was playing Skyrim. It wasn't until my second playthrough that I felt like I had a grasp of what was going on. My first playthrough of Skyrim was very much like learning things about, like, I'd go and read forums and then come back and start playing the game and having just learned something new, like the idea of dragons being like organic time machines and stuff like that. I was just like, this is, the craziest shit. It was very like it was Skyrim to me was mostly about the, this really great story of a fight against a world-ending deity, and about learning this amazing type of magic, and becoming walking in the footsteps of people who might have been considered gods. Izmir, for example, is a very important character in Nordic history, and another person who knew how to use shouts was Tiber Septim, and he was literally, Talos. He's the god that they're banned from worshiping in Skyrim, and it's
God, not God.
Well, Tiber Septim and his other half of his soul, Tiber Septim and company, like Tiber Septim plus one. But was he actually a god? I mean, I think we've had like 2 or 3 episodes in the podcast about that. that's a lot of our what is a god? It's hard to say in the Elder Scrolls universe. It depends on what your opinion is, really. But if Tiber Septim wasn't a god, then maybe neither is Vivek, and I wouldn't say that to her face.
Did you say her?
Here, it's I try really hard to use gender neutral pronouns for Vivek. Yeah,
it's a bit ambiguous with Vivek at times.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's supposed to be. That's the whole deal. That's the point.
That's also the whole deal with the lore, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
The whole we don't know is what makes it so interesting as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's even as relatively sure as we are about the Thalmor being, their legitimacy, could still be wrong. Not the kind of thing you want to find out the hard way. But I don't think there's any. There are very few events in the Elder Scrolls universe that are considered to be like definite. I think even the idea of like the Kalpic cycle in the Elder Scrolls universe is reinforced by many cultures, but not all of them. And the creation of the world and how the how Mundus came about and the structure of, is Mundus inside of Oblivion? Is Oblivion inside of Aetherius? That's generally considered by most lore nerds to be the case, but there are cultures in the Elder Scrolls universe that don't feel that way. The Redguard, for example, have a very different structure. And it's just, and I mean, nobody's even asked the Hist. Like Argonians, I don't know what their idea is. And the Satesi have their whole egg cracking weirdness, but it's just I think Kirkbride once said that Morrowind was the first postmodern role-playing game, which could be accurate. But it's supposed to be entirely up to the eye of the beholder. It's supposed to be the legitimacy and the experience of the game is supposed to be determined by the player and nobody else. It's one of the reasons why they go out of their way not to tell you what happened in the previous game. And when another game comes out, when Oblivion came out, they mentioned the Nerevarine very briefly in like a couple of throwaway dialogue lines of like, oh, he went to Akavir, supposedly. They didn't even know that. And nobody mentions...
If they say anything about the Nerevarine, it's not going to be my story, and I'm going to go, no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And there's as many stories as there are players, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. And exactly. And every player has sort of created this, little fractal element of their gameplay that Bethesda tries very hard to not invalidate. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of the games take place in like hundreds of years after each other, is so that there's an element of time that can happen where the people can tell the player, well, that was hundreds of years ago, nobody remembers, like why are you bringing up old shit? It's like, and that works out well because the last thing in the world you want players to do is feel like Bethesda just decanonized their gameplay, and it's one of the reasons why the Elder Scrolls games have such have so much to do in them, is because they don't want players to ever feel like they're playing exactly the same game as somebody else. So, I mean, I think ideally speaking, I don't know. I don't want to speculate about this exactly, but I strongly suspect that it's always been sort of Bethesda's idea to have like an Elder Scrolls game feel like a tabletop RPG, where you can do pretty much anything you want, and I think they tried very hard to get that feeling, but obviously, time and budget are are a factor. So.
You mentioned the different time periods.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular era that you would actually like to see in, I don't know, Elder Scrolls 6, for example? Is there one that you're curious to see how Bethesda would present that particular time?
I'm not sure I would want to play a whole game, but I would like to. It would be really bad for the lore, but I would like to see like the Merethic era and the creation of the world. Because I think the visuals would be really cool, but I'm not sure that it would be a good thing for us, like the lore community, because then it might accidentally like nail down, definite answers, which we abhor.
You can stop talking, stop reading, stop discussing, researching. Here's the answer.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
No.
And it's sort of like I like Kirkbride's depiction of the Fifth Era in Coda, but it's not something that I think Bethesda's going to do, considering how unusual it is. I don't know. I would rather, like, from a game like from Elder Scrolls 6 or any official game, I would like to see more stuff in space. We had a whole game, Elder Scrolls, I almost said Dark Tower. Jesus, that's wrong. Was it Blackspire, I think, or something?
Battlespire.
Battlespire, there you go. That was that takes place on a mage tower for training, intended to train mages in the Imperial army. That's just stuck into the side of an asteroid that's floating around in Mundus, in Oblivion. And I'd like to see more crazy stuff like that. I'd like to see, moth ships and Alinor sunbirds, and I'd like to go to the moon. I'd love to see or moons. Moon. Excuse me. Yeah, either one. Yeah. That's what I'd like to get into. I would just like some more space lore. I'd like that from Elder Scrolls Online too, and frankly, I think we're probably more likely to see it in ESO than we are in a Bethesda game.
Yeah, you bring up ESO and the lore. Very often, at least in the Morrowind community that I know better, ESO and lore just don't go together. I say ESO is butchering the lore. Now, I don't know the lore either way, but since I have a specialist with me, what do you think of the lore? You've already said that there's a lot of it.
Yeah, there's an unbelievable amount of it. There's so much that I've almost kind of gotten into the habit of ignoring it, because there's so much to read. I can't possibly get into all of it. But I'm not going to say that every single book in ESO is brilliant, but ESO is responsible for giving us, the Clockwork City expansion and a lot of little ideas that Lawrence Schick and Tuttle have been putting out, like the idea of there was when Oblivion came out, everybody was like, wow, it's gonna have to take place in Cyrodiil, and that's a big swamp. And then Oblivion comes out and it looks like Lord of the Rings, and a lot of like very, I'm gonna use the word passionate lore nerds were very upset about that, because they're like, that's not supposed to look like this. And then they, I think Kirkbride put out the Red Legion's text in the official forums that suggested that Tiber Septim had used the power of Thum and the knowledge of the state of Chim to change the landscape of Cyrodiil to be beautiful and green and lush and verdant, instead of you know, a mosquito hive. And and I thought that was great. It was sort of like, it was one of those things that kind of inspired me to think about lore in terms of like when a Bethesda game comes out that does something that people think is stupid or contradictory or whatever, it's really more of an opportunity for people to create really good lore to explain it. And the Red Legion's text is one of my favorite things because it does exactly that. Instead of frankly whining about the change, it created this really cool idea that, you know, not only did Tiber Septim attain Chim, but that he also was able to create like this landscape himself. But a lot of people didn't like that. They felt like it was sort of like, oh, it's just sort of like waving your hands saying it's magic, you know? Yeah. And then in ESO, Lawrence Schick, I think, wrote a document that was a historical scholar speculating about because in ESO, which happens before Tiber Septim, Cyrodiil looks like it does in Oblivion. And so, of course, people are like, well, then what's the deal? And there's this document. Yeah, there's this document that came out that said in ESO that said that what had happened was when the Cyrodiil Alessian Rebellion took over the White Gold Tower, the occupants of the people who control the tower in the mythic term, you know, in the metaphysical term, determine then what the landscape around that the tower influences looks like. It's sort of goes back to your King Arthur, you know, the king is the land, the king is the forest kind of idea. That, you know, when the king is sick, the forest is sick, and when the king is well, the forest is thriving. And so like when the Alessian Rebellion took over and the Cyrods moved into White Gold Tower, the landscape began to change relatively rapidly over time. To reflect the, you know, psyche, I guess, of the mannish, you know, people that had taken over, as opposed to the Aliens, who were, I mean, many were very good, were great people, but a lot of them, very noteworthily, were just off their rocker crazy. So, so it sort of made sense that the Aliens were corrupt, and therefore the landscape was, you know, uninhabitable and awful.
Fair enough.
And that's that's just the first example that comes up in my head of how the lore in ESO is taking things in very good directions and expanding stuff and making it more interesting, not just more of it. It's not just more lore, it's more interesting lore, and it's changing existing lore to make it more just better, really. I mean, just more colorful, and you know, and documents are coming out that take stuff that we took for granted in Bethesda games and saying, no, that's BS. That never happened that way, and it actually happened like this, which is, of course, usually like, you know, a scholar trying to promote his own idea in the universe. And so that just creates more. What was it? The contradiction is confirmation, I think, is the phrase that was being thrown around. Is that the moment, like, you can't really tell if something is true or really happened at all until somebody else says that it didn't. And then you could be like, all right, if somebody cares that we think it didn't happen, then it probably did happen. And that's so ESO has been phenomenal for lore. It's had some very interesting quests. If you've never played the Clockwork City, it's worth the price of admission alone. It's unbelievably good.
I've been told
yeah,
multiple times.
Yeah. And so if anybody's on the fence about it, like, I don't think it's free to play exactly, but I think it's very inexpensive, and I would highly recommend picking it up. But it's but I mean, it's not going to make you love MMOs. Certainly didn't me.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It's people have to keep in mind that sure, it's in the world of the Elder Scrolls, but it's still an MMORPG. So if you hate the genre, even if it's the Elder Scrolls, it's not going to make you love the genre.
No, you're still going to unfortunately struggle under some of the, you know, tropes of MMOs that you don't enjoy. The good news is it's microtransaction free. The only cash that you have to hand over aside from buying expansions is for just, you know, cosmetics that don't matter.
Don't really matter.
I think you have to pay money to play an Imperial. So
I think it was part of a DLC or something.
Yeah, it was. I think it was part of like an edition that you had to buy or something. And but I mean, Imperials don't really. It's like whatever, it doesn't matter.
Why play for
they're not Bretons,
Imperial
but
when
they,
you can be a Dunmer?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, right. Yeah. My
I
point.
will say this for Elder Scrolls Online, it is the Elder Scrolls games that made me love the Argonian race. Before that, they were just ugly, like could not play them. But in Elder Scrolls Online, so pretty. Khajiits as well. And now I play them, well, modded in Morrowind, but I'm okay with them. And that's thanks to Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the Khajiit especially got so much love and attention in ESO that it's great. If you're a Khajiit fan, then you will absolutely love ESO. There's plenty of content there for you. Argonians got a lot of attention too, but I feel like just me personally, I mean, it's possible I might have missed a big chunk of content somewhere, but I sort of feel like Argonians, as much as attention as they got, I feel like Khajiit kind of won that little unofficial battle. If anything, for a while there, I was a little bit upset that Dunmer didn't really get much as a big Dunmer weeb, but they got some stuff, and then when the Morrowind expansion in Clockwork City came out, there was a huge thing of additional material for Morrowind nerds to dig their teeth into. So that was nice. Running the Ashlanders out of was it Scar, the big land crab?
Aldrin.
In Aldrin, running Ashlanders out of Aldrin, it was fantastic. When the quest line literally has you at the end say, "I'm sure they'll give it back when they're done."
I remember that bit. I enjoyed meeting now which failed incarnate was it. Anyway, and I was like, I've seen you, but you were a ghost.
I know that dude. Yeah, he's in the cave.
You look better, rosy cheeks and all that.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was a terrific. It was. There's one of the nicest things about the Morrowind expansion to ESO is the little things that they put in for Morrowind nerds to get all wiggly about. There's. I don't want to spoil it, but there is a sixth house quest in it.
Oh.
But if you're paying very close attention, you'll hear rumors people are talking about. There's so and so says she's having these bizarre dreams, and you go, somebody better watch her ass.
It has begun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great. It's terrific. Yeah.
It's one of the great things about the Elder Scrolls is the fact that the world is coherent enough that when you play one game, you get those little flashbacks of another game, but at the same time, not so coherent that you know what's going on all the time, because that would spoil things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they have to leave stuff up for interpretation. It's one of the things that Elder Scrolls is best at. They've never had a voice in the universe that is like, Tolkien's, I suppose you could say, for his setting, where, I mean, Tolkien laid down, this is how the world was built, and this was the god that created everything, and these are the gods that sang in the choruses, and they, blah 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 blah, and here's Melkor and the gods that work for him, and nobody, from what you can from what you're told in the in Middle Earth, argues that point. Everybody's like, yeah, that's how it works, which always sort of stuck in my craw, because it's like the first thing that would happen with at least the men of the East and such is they would come back and say, and with their distrust of elves, they'd say, well, we got all that information from elves. Why do we believe them? The elves are bad guys. Why would we believe them? They're just trying to con us into making us think that the elves are better, but they ain't better. They ain't so damn special. And
they're pretty.
Yeah, well, whatever. And so it's, that was one of the things that always struck me as odd, is that we never really got alternative creation myths in the Lord of the Rings, and that's because I'm so used to it in Elder Scrolls. ESO has introduced the Maormer in a big way, and I'm looking forward to finding out what their creation myth is, which I assume somebody's either worked on and I missed it or are currently working on. Yeah, it's going to be great. ESO is it's still going. You know, they're still cranking out great material. Well, I say great material, but they're going to spend a year talking about Bretons, so whatever.
not as interesting.
No, I kid. It's sort of a running gag on our podcast that Bretons are boring. They're not. It's the only complaint that I have about Bretons is that they're too Britannic. They're too much. The mythology of Bretons is too similar to real life Bretons, and I prefer there to be a much wider separation between real world mythology and Elder Scrolls mythology. And real life Britannic myth is really freaking fascinating, you know. But it's not, but it's been done, you know. And I kind of was hoping that ESO would change that a little bit, and they didn't. They expanded on the lore of the Forsworn, which was great. That was really terrific. The work that they did on the Forsworn culture was a joy to read and made them very, very interesting. But I don't know. A lot of the material that they're putting out for the New Breton expansion stuff hasn't been put out yet. So, I mean, I'd love it if they prove me wrong. That'd be great.
There you go. You heard it. At the same time, I guess it is nice for people to see something that kind of makes sense, or that they can relate to, because if it's always weird and complicated, at some point the brain goes, come on, give me a break.
It's too much.
Just let me go kill a dragon or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I think they got rid of the you didn't see any of the totemic gods in Skyrim, which was supposed to be as late as Oblivion. We were told that
there was a quest, I remember, where you go and hunt the spirit something and something and something. I forgot.
Something or other. Yeah, and it would have been nice to see more of that. But I can understand why. The thrust of Skyrim was supposed to be about removing Izmir removing Talos from the pantheon, and so I can understand why they did it. You know. Yeah.
Sometimes too much is not better. Actually, often too much is not better. At one point you said, I'm not saying that every book in the Elder Scrolls Online is great. I had a question. In Morrowind, there are tons of books. And they feel, apart from the sermons, like it is number, so they go together. But there's a lot of individual books that seem to just tell a story. Is there a meaning in every single book?
No, sometimes it's just in universe fiction.
It's just a story.
Yeah. The real Berenzia, if I recall correctly, is supposed to be read as like a fictional retelling of Berenzia's background. That was at the final year of the Third Era, 2920, I think, is definitely supposed to be like historical fiction, sort of. So yeah, every once in a while you'll get a book that in ESO or the Bethesda games that is not supposed to be taken literally or as factual, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, they're all supposed to be taken.
You're not supposed to try and read between the lines.
Right.
Just a story. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now, good luck finding out which ones are.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, man. You got to read the hell out of them. You can't just take anything at face value. You really got to think about this stuff. Why it's a challenge.
But clearly, 10 years and counting.
Yep. Still going.
Yeah, but it's great at the same time. Do you sometimes get demotivated thinking there's still so much to read, to study, to compare, to think about?
No. If I get demotivated, it's because something happening in my life that makes it hard to work. That's kind of the way things have been the past month. It's been. I've been talking to my community about it. It's not been easy. But mental health has been an issue for me for over 30 years, and it's been a struggle those whole 30 years, but this last month has been just unbelievably bad, and so that that's the nice thing about it, but at the same time it's still motivating in a way, because one of the many really valuable things that I got from ESO, from Elder Scrolls lore, is the way that I feel about just struggle and life in general. I wrote a whole article about it, about why the Dunmer worship Daedra. Like, why in God's name would anybody worship Molag Bal? That's a terrible idea. And it's because of, among other things, the sort of game theory idea of the only way for you to improve is to lose, is to be challenged. And if you are constantly challenged and you're constantly winning, then you're not getting any more data. All you're learning is, well, what I'm currently doing is the right move. If you imagine things from a swordsman standpoint, if a swordsman learns a type of kung fu that's just unstoppable, then his life begins to stagnate. And there's actually a wuxia story about this, called a character called Dugu Seeking a Loss, and it's a very interesting idea. The idea that people who want to improve their lives need to be challenged, but the only way to know if you're actually being challenged is for you to occasionally lose. And depending on who you are, that win-loss ratio might be just very closely balanced. I don't know where I got the phrase from, but I remember somebody said that I want the story of my life to be a tale of losses against increasingly harder opponents. And and I like that idea. I like the I like the idea that I can approach life from a standpoint of, if I'm careful that my losses aren't too horrible, then losing on occasion, being on my back foot, is not a bad place to be. It's just an opportunity to improve. And that's kind of the way I've been. Yeah, exactly. And it's the way like I said, as bad as this last month has been, it's also been a motivation for me to start finally getting in shape. I'm getting some much needed dental work done, which is terrific. It's been a huge boost to my marriage, because it kind of brought out into the clear that I had, even though my wife says she didn't notice, I was like, I need work. I need to do work. I could be doing this better. And so that's kind of, and it's been, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm enjoying any of this crap, but at least there are gains, There's there is a silver lining, it's not all 100% grimdark all the time, which is nice. It's just, but I would say that that's probably the part, where that Elder Scrolls lore has helped me the most in my life, has been giving me these philosophies and ideas of that I've adopted from that I've discovered and through research from all these real world sources, that has made the whole world, my real world, seem much more. I mean, it's still incomprehensible by its very nature. It's supposed to be, but it makes it feel like I can at least cope a little better than I used to before I got into this. It's never going to be easy. It should, ideally speaking, never be easy. But life at least feels like I can manage it a little better than I was. And you only get to do this once, so any improvement is actually a huge deal.
It's crazy to think that, in a way, you get life lessons from a game or through a game.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it comes from the reading that you've done. But it's just a game. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when Kirkbride started bringing in all these, metaphysics ideas and philosophy and religion, I mean, theoretically, you could. I mean, it's not the case, but theoretically, you could say that you could be a dick about it and say that he only put them in there because he liked the phrasing, you know. And I mean, you could just ask him and he'll tell you no. That's not the case at all. He says that he told me that the 36 Lessons of Vivek has real magic in it, and I understand why I'm not a magical practitioner by any stretch. I'm the son of a nuclear physicist and a math major, so I don't. It's a little hard for me to. I was raised a scientist from birth, so it's kind of hard for me to make that leap. That paradigm does not work in my head, but I understand. I think pretty well from all this research I've been doing. I understand the perspective of people who do believe it, and I understand why he would say that, and I can see it. Like, I can see the stuff that he did, and so that's sort of that. Yeah, it's been very helpful. The texts that he references have centuries, if not millennia, of human research behind it and human thought, and it's, you know, it's unbelievably complex. So it doesn't really surprise me. I mean, if you want to be mean-spirited about it, you could theoretically create any art that was like this by just drawing anything you wanted, any kind of fluffy whatever, dogs in a field or something, and then just put a cross in the painting, just a crucifix, and then people can just sit and then just sit back. And eventually, somebody with the right kind of mind is going to come along and go, well, you see, the cross symbolizes blah, 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 blah. And if you've done your research into this, that, and the other, you'll know that this, and then all of a sudden, this whole worlds of meaning can sprout out of it. Did you intend for those whole worlds of meaning to be put into it just because you painted a stupid-ass crucifix on the painting? No. Or maybe. Who knows?
Maybe you hated it, you crossed it out, but your canvas was the other
turned
way.
it sideways. Who knows? You know. But the whole point behind the postmodern movement is that it actually doesn't matter what you wanted. It doesn't matter what the artist wanted.
It's up to the audience.
The only thing that matters is what the viewer feels. Yeah. And so that's, again, that's why I'm, you know, I don't really. Yeah, it would be hard for somebody to argue that I'm wasting my time with this, with Elder Scrolls lore, because it's entirely about the eye of the beholder. You know, it's only a waste of time when I decide it's a waste of time, and I really hope that never happens. I mean, I can't predict the future, but I really enjoy this, and I don't want to stop.
I think that's good news for all the people that listen to you on Twitch, on YouTube. Read your articles. You mentioned the articles. Where do we find those?
Well, this is around the anything I've written that's worth a damn is on newwillingschool.com.
All right, good. I was going to say something. Yes, and then of course the people who will join after listening to you, hopefully, and take an interest in the lore and maybe philosophy and the game and everything.
I sure hope so. Yeah, it's a whole world for us to love you in. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking for an hour. Which is not bad, just considering I contacted people and say, would you like to talk to me for 15 to 30 minutes?
Yeah.
I was honestly
if you've ever listened to any of our,
honest when I said that.
Well, if you've ever listened to any of my podcasts, you know that I can't stay on topic. So
as long as
I
it's
ramble
interesting,
like an idiot.
No, it's not like an idiot. We've talked about quite a lot of things. Is there something that we haven't mentioned that you wanted to discuss?
No, I'm really happy that we covered everything. I would like to say that I hope that eventually it would be really great if we could, if somehow or another we could get all of the developers involved with Morrowind to suddenly have like perfect memory, because I've always wanted to hear more stories about Morrowind's development period. And especially all the ideas that they had that they threw out or couldn't figure out a way to fit into the game. Those are always really fascinating to me. I love like video game postmortems and such. So the only thing that I can't think of anything I would like to discuss, but the only thing that I would like to learn more about from Morrowind would be, what didn't get into the game. So if, ideally speaking, Todd Howard, if you're listening to this, hook a dude up. Come on, bro. Come on my podcast, Todd. I'll be nice.
What they should do is take all the bits that were cut out from all the Elder Scrolls games and make that into a new game.
Yeah, one whole really weird game.
Well, there we go. That's how we wish for 2090, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. That was extremely interesting.
Well, good.
You know what? That's the 20 years of Morrowind. With a bit of luck, we'll talk again in 20 years and see what you've discovered that you have no idea about. Yeah, 20 years we'll be there.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Maybe false teeth. I don't know, but we'll be there.
Oh yeah. I'll be so gray. Oh my god. I'll be so gray.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, and there's my cat to say goodbye.
Oh.
And nobody can see him. That is so cruel. If you knew how cute he is. Anyway.
That's one adorable cat. I'm not kidding. Yeah.
I might throw in a picture. But anyway, that's besides the point. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you. It really was.
Thank you for having me.